and hopefully they can benefit from the informations and the resources that we will refer them to in evaluating Jeff Merkley and other candidates. I would like to start with Jeff Merkley. We have a lot of topics. He has been in office for 12 years, so we can talk about a lot of issues. I would like to start with foreign policy. Merkley started his tenure in the Senate in 2009, at the same year that Obama won the presidency. So 2009, when we look at it, it started with backing a coup in Honduras. This is how they started this presidency. They backed a coup in Honduras. I think Amy Goodman is one of the only reporters who has done a great job covering the Honduras coup. And she, I think, even interviewed the president of Honduras. Regardless, because of that coup, because of that intervention, which is not legal according to the international law, because of that coup, hundreds of thousands of Hondurans were killed, died. This is only one of the policies that Jeff Merkley really looked the other way while his party is handling it, organizing it. I think specifically Amy Goodman talked about Hillary Clinton's role in this coup. And by the way, when Hillary Clinton won the nomination, when Obama appointed her for the Secretary of State, Jeff Merkley issued a statement really praising Hillary Clinton despite her known records of supporting war crimes, of committing war crimes. So despite all of that, Jeff Merkley issued that statement. If you don't mind, I would like to read it, and I would like to see if you have any comments about it. So he said, "I am very proud to cast a vote today in support of the nomination of Senator Hillary Clinton. Senator Clinton has long been a role model to so many, particularly the millions of women and girls who have been inspired by her career and historic presidential run. She is extraordinary, well qualified to help steer our nation in addressing a number of world challenges." As I said, 2009, after her nomination, she organized the coup in Honduras. But I don't know, what does he mean? She's well qualified for this role, including 2 wars, global climate change and international economic meltdown. I'm sorry to lose her voice in the Senate, but I know that her leadership at the State Department will be instrumental in restoring our relationship and reputation in the world.
He probably expected her to be president one day.
Yeah, probably. Mr. Dresser, would you like to?
Yeah, I plenty I can say about that one. Yeah, I mean, Hillary was essentially a co-president with Bill, and the things that the Clinton administration did that the American public knows nothing about are absolutely unspeakable. He was behind the Rwandan massacre in 1994. He supported the invasion of Rwanda by Paul Kagame out of Uganda. That 100-day genocidal war killed a million people or something. It was just bizarre. He actually blocked Romeo Dallaire, General Dallaire's, the UN general who had a peacekeeping force there. He blocked Dallaire's request for 8,000 troops from the UN that could have stopped that. He vetoed it. And he ordered the UN to withdraw the troops it had there. He subsequently supported Paul Kagame in 2 invasions of Zaire to gain control of the rare earth metals there that are very essential in cell phones and other microelectronics. And there have been about 7 million Africans now have died in these so-called conflict mineral wars that Bill Clinton started. He also denied Nelson Mandela in Africa a request to waive patent limitations for prescription drugs to make generic drugs for AIDS victims that could have been treated for $350 a year with the generic drugs. So we don't know how many millions of people in Africa died because of this. And of course, John Podesta, who happened to have been his chief of staff, who was also Hillary's campaign manager last time around, is a big pharma lobbyist.
Yeah,
So
the point, sorry for interject.
Well,
So the point that you want to raise, that a person like Hillary Clinton gets praised by someone like Merkley, a prisoner, actually encouraging people to admire her.
That's right.
And she's that kind of person. It is telling. It tells us what how Merkley think, and this is really a dangerous mentality. When we praise war criminals, we are supporting the action that they are taking, and this is very dangerous. I don't know how someone can really look the other way on a war criminal, let alone support them.
They don't know.
Yeah,
They don't know. They don't know that it's criminal. They have Congress people, particularly Democrats, constantly telling them that, oh, the power to declare war belongs to Congress. And so they think that if Congress authorizes it, then it's legal. They don't understand that the U.S. Constitution says that treaties are the law of the land. And in fact, only the UN Security Council can authorize an aggressive or invasive war. The public has been gaslighted by this for years and years since the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, to where they don't mind that all these invasions are taking place as long as Congress says so. So that ignorance out there is, when we're saying that they're criminals, yes, when Congress decides to do something illegal, there may not be U.S. laws that can hold them accountable yet. There should be, but there are laws. International laws do say that what they're doing is illegal. They can't do that.
Yeah,
it is illegal, and it is illegal under American law also, because
it's just not self-executing.
The United Nations Charter prohibits all aggressive war, and Article 6 of our Constitution declares our international treaties, such as the UN Charter, the supreme law of the land. So this is actually an impeachable offense. It is a violation of the Constitution itself and an impeachable offense.
Yeah, I think the same article says that these violations to the supreme law of the land is considered a high crime.
It is a high crime.
It is a high crime. So by definition, everyone who votes for these illegal wars is a criminal. By the Constitution, constitutionally is a criminal. And we're not talking about the Declaration of Human Rights, which is really an atrocious story. If we want to talk about the humanitarian side of these wars, it is a tragedy. It is a tragedy. It is an atrocity.
Yeah. And Hillary proved herself a few years later, by orchestrating what you brought up, Ibra, which was the attack on Libya. Not just an attack, but a sadistic murder of Colonel Gaddafi and a complete destruction of what was the most highly developed country in Africa, with a human development index equal to that of Western Europe. And who can forget Hillary's cackling about the sadistic sodomy by bayonet murder of Colonel Gaddafi? She was cackling and paraphrasing Julius Caesar. You know, we came, we saw, he died. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, it shows how monster she is. And by the way, in 2011, when the Congress decided to wage a regime change war, to change the Gaddafi regime, the whole Congress, including Jeff Merkley, voted on that invasion. They did not vote on the particular order of invasion, but they voted that Gaddafi needs to go away. This is in itself is a violation for our constitution, as we said, and it is also not a new policy of our country, of the warmongers in our country. This is what they have been doing for years, for decades. They decide to wage a regime change in a country, and they go and do it without any accountability. So 2011, that resolution, it was resolution 84. It was passed by unanimous consent. And that resolution really came after years of sanctions, which in themselves, sanctions are illegal too. Sanctions kill people.
Yeah.
I think there's a good website. It's called Sanctions Kill People. They talk in details about how many countries we are sanctioning right now and the effects and the consequences of these sanctions, which Merkley himself is supportive of them. We can talk about later about how many countries he voted to sanction himself. Dan, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I was wondering if I might test out the screen share just to put UNC 2.4 up on the screen, because what we're dealing with again is a lot of ignorance out there about what the law is.
Yeah, you can share it, I think.
Okay, 1 second. Let's see if it works. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, there it is. That's the law.
Yeah.
Under our Constitution, we signed this treaty right here, the United Nations Charter. All members, that's us, shall refrain in their international relations. That's what we do to other countries, from the threat or use of force
against the territorial
this,
integrity and political independence.
Or political independence. And that's where the sanctions come in, because partly where the sanctions come in, because when we do that, we're still messing with them, and we're trying to overthrow their governments.
Well, the astonishing thing is the threat.
Yeah.
Just threatening them is a violation.
It's extortion.
Right. And this, of course, this isn't news to everyone that's going to be watching this, but it is news to some of them that this is the law. And our political evasion of adherence to this law is boiled down to the word exceptionalism, U.S. exceptionalism. Like, we don't have to, we're an exception. We don't have to obey this. And there's hardly anyone in government right now, in elected government, that has any interest whatsoever in actually abiding by this law, by international law.
You notice the words territorial integrity. Those are violated by the drone killings, which Obama began almost immediately after taking office, every Tuesday, choosing drone victims that violated the territorial integrity of Pakistan over and over and over.
Yes, and that's normal now. The droning still happen every day. The Afghan war has been going on since. It's still, we're still there.
Yeah,
people have forgotten all about it. And
we're still 3 weeks after 9/11.
Mr. Dresser, you reminded me of a story was published by Willamette Week here in Oregon. They talked about Merkley's statement about Libya. And in that statement, he said he opposed having troops in Libya. and he preferred changing the regime without really having any troops. So he preferred the strikes, the bombing, but not the troops themselves, because he thought that it is strategically wrong. Because what it means specifically about Libya, because they have a nuclear program, right? And they were willing to give up on their program. So when they gave up on their program, we went there and we toppled the regime. We committed that heinous crime. And it is a message to the world that you don't need really to give up your nuclear weapons, because you're going to face the same destiny, the same thing that happens in Libya. So it was that rationalization from Merkley. It is not about human life. He didn't mention about anything uh, about resembles any humanitarian thinking and anything that values human life, anything related to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is not in his reasoning. People need to check it out. He talks about strategy, geopolitics. People are being killed illegally. None of them harmed us. None of them attacked us. None of them really threatened to attack our country. And he justifies that with some projects, some geopolitical projects, fancy fictional stories. And this is what they have been telling us, selling to the people to accept these wars. And the public is not really willing to investigate, to question these narratives.
They don't know it's illegal, first of all, and second, they're just all too willing to buy the Good Cop Act.
Yeah, but there's more to it. I think.
Actually, well, if you recall, I recall at least the years after the Iraq War, the original casus belli was the imaginary WMDs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But after that, when they found out, well, obviously they weren't there, and that was BS. Then it came down to other things like, well, now we're going to make them a democracy, make them like us, export our cultural values, and that is still going on, and that's still very popular. That's what's going on in Syria now. The Syrian war started as at least in American propaganda as like we're going to overthrow a dictator, and that was the same attitude in the U.S. media about Gaddafi.
See, it's very important to get past that to go to the next step. George Orwell called this stop crime. You're not allowed to think about certain things because once you open that door, there's a whole corridor behind that with lots of other doors that they don't want you to open. So once we recognize that the excuse for attacking Iraq was nonsense, that the excuse for attacking Libya was nonsense, you then have to look at what the real reasons are. In the case of Libya, the reasons are very obvious if people were paying attention to history and geography. Gaddafi had a very well-developed state. He had public banking, and he was proposing to expand his public banking model to all of Africa. He was proposing to create a pan-African currency, the dinar, and he was proposing to create an African development bank that was threatening the entire control of the World Bank and the IMF over African resources. That's the same reason Patrice Lumumba was assassinated by the CIA in 1961, and why Clinton orchestrated the invasion in Rwanda and so forth. So this goes again back. So Hillary was fulfilling an agenda that had been originally launched by her husband during his administration to control the resources of Africa.
So why don't we move on with with the other policies and the foreign policy. I think we mentioned Libya, and the public should know that we turned a prosperous state into a failed state. We killed people, and now they have an open slave market. Literally, if you want to buy a slave, you go to Libya. For a war we caused, for a destruction we caused, and on top of that, it was illegal. And all of those Congress members voted for that bill. I think people would argue this is a unanimous consent. People can block it. Congress members have the ability to block these bills. They can say no, but nothing of that sort has happened. And this is not the unique bill that nobody really tried to stop it, to fight it. So this is with regards to Syria, which is the second war during Merkley's time in Congress. The third one is Syria. Syria started when Obama again decided to change the regime in Syria. Syria, by the way, like the others, never attacked us, never been a threat to us.
No, they didn't have a democracy.
Yeah, it is
supposedly.
about
So we have to help them get a democracy.
It is
that's left over from the post invasion Iraq, and that was the theme of democratic politics. Was they're out from, because they mostly voted for the invasion of Iraq, so they had to find a way to change their minds, and they ended up with this attitude of democracy export.
Yeah, so when it started with sanctions, again illegal. Merkley was supportive of these sanctions. Then it started with arming terrorist groups. We literally armed terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda. Isn't that amazing? The Congress knowingly armed these terrorist groups, and at the beginning they were calling them moderate rebels. Then we can discover that the same Congress introduced a bill saying Stop Arming Terrorist Groups in Syria Act. We literally have a bill on the Congress called Stop Arming Terrorists. Stop Arming Terrorists in Syria. And the whole Congress again voted for it. What do you need more than that? What do you need? You are the voter who is listening to us. What do you need more to know about these crimes, these atrocities, to take a different stand?
They need to know that it's illegal. It is criminal, and it's an act of war to be arming insurgents in another country. And that's true whether they're terrorists or anyone else. The authority to do this, to do any of this international war, lies in the United Nations Security Council. And if we went to the UNSC, we'd get vetoed. The last time we didn't get vetoed was actually, we didn't get vetoed in Libya, but they didn't actually authorize the overthrow of Gaddafi either. The last time they did authorize a U.S. war was probably the Persian Gulf War, the original one, George H.W. Bush, and that didn't make it right, but it was more legal than anything we've done since.
Congress does not have the right to authorize something illegal under international law. They don't have that right.
No, they don't, and people need to know that. People need to understand that. It's we call it exceptionalism.
Okay. There's no one has the right to kill someone. None. No one has the right to kill someone else. We're talking about in Syria, 400,000 people were killed. 400,000 people. What do you want more criminal than this? 400,000 people were killed, millions displaced, and on top of that, in 2017, when when Trump announced that he wants to withdraw, 400 members in the Congress, 400 members in the Congress wrote a letter to Trump, urging him to not withdraw from Syria, not to end the Syrian war. And they did it again in 2018. Merkley was one of them in both times. He is urging Trump to not end an illegal war, a criminal war that killed 400,000 Syrians, displaced millions of people. And still, when I go out and tell people that Merkley did that, they say, no, he's a good guy. He supported the crime several times, the same crime. How is he a good guy? Can someone let me understand what criteria is that? How someone help crimes, help killing people is a good guy?
They believe that that Bashar al-Assad is a bad guy. We do this process of demonizing the foreign leader in the United States. Can I do another screen share?
Yeah, sure.
Here we go. This one was in 2017 before one of the Trump missile strikes. This is what Merkley said. He said, "There is no doubt," and you may recall that the evidence that, well, there was no evidence. It was completely debunked that the Syrian government had committed any chemical weapon attack. But Merkley was right here, along with the rest of his party and nearly the entire U.S. Senate, saying that there is no doubt that Assad did this chemical weapons attack, which was
and there in fact was no evidence of it whatsoever,
right.
And it flew in the face of reason.
Why would he do that?
That's right. He was winning the war, and in that first accusation, it was soon after Obama had said, "Okay, the use of chemical weapons is where we draw the line. That's when we're going to come after you." So immediately there was a UN inspection team that had just arrived in Damascus, about 10 miles from this chemical weapon attack that immediately followed. So Assad is such an idiot. He's going to stage a chemical weapon attack a few miles from the International Chemical Weapons Inspection Team when he's already winning the war. So this involves a complete shutdown of any sort of reasoning ability in the American public. It's a complete insult to the collective intelligence of Americans, which maybe they deserve.
And because of, I would like to really confirm what happened, that Merkley is not only voted on that war, supported these crimes. When that report came, the media started propagating the chemical attack. Merkley participated in it, peddled it, and according to which Trump bombed Syria, killed more people, according to that attack, and they repeated the same thing in 2018. So Merkley never stopped peddling the CIA narrative, spreading these lies. And by the way, it is ironic, but Jimmy Dore covered the story about the CNN, how they covered the chemical attack in Syria. They sent a reporter there, and she literally just held a backpack, and she wanted to confirm that it was the sarin gas was released there. So she wanted to test it herself on camera, and she took like a backpack and she sniffed it, and she said, "Yeah, it stinks," meaning this is for sure a chemical weapon. Can you imagine this? So it is like I'm telling you, there's a poison that killed people. Oh, let me make sure, let me drink it. This is what the CNN reporter did. And this is the same story that Democrats and Republicans are spreading between the people. And again, we killed more people because of that. And it is a criminal act. And again, Merkley supported it. So this is the Syrian war that it is still ongoing.
Let me bring in one other issue here to talk about not only crimes of commission, but crimes of omission. Now, if you and I, who are not politicians, we're not political scientists, we're not journalists, if we can find out all these things, Jeff Merkley certainly could have found them out. And finding them out, he had the responsibility to tell us the truth. We didn't elect him to lie to us. We elected him to tell us the truth.
Well, the thing about Merkley, people, they want to believe that he's different than the others, that he doesn't lie, he doesn't deceive, he doesn't commit crimes. But they need to learn about his records. People ask me, why are you running against Merkley? He's viewed as one of the most progressive people. I said, he's not. And I want to change this idea. I want to tell people his records. His records, not mine.
He's a poser. And I've got a good example of something he did that I just found. I didn't know about it at the time in 2018, but the fake anti-war politicians are always going through the motions and posturing and saying, you know, they throw out a lot of rhetoric to make it look like they're serious. And it turns out Merkley did he introduced, it didn't go anywhere, but, you know, they introduced bills in Congress just for show that have absolutely no chance, and they give them a title that looks good. Well, Merkley did that here. He introduced an alternative AUMF, if you can see that.
Yes.
Okay. This was his authorization for use of force. Okay. Now he loves to tell people that he opposed the Iraq War. Okay. Now, if you read through this, authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force in Iraq and Afghanistan in order to protect the United States and its compelling interests. Where we heard where do we usually hear that? U.S. interests is typically, is it not, the excuse to commit aggressive wars rather than defensive wars, because our interests are all around the world, because our armies are already around the world. Well, compelling interest is defined down in section 11. Let's see what compelling interests are. So, definitions. Compelling interest means the following: United States territory, United States armed forces, or United States citizens. So, not about territorial defense whatsoever. Our armies are in Iraq and Afghanistan, and this Iraq war opponent, so supposedly Iraq war opponent's alternative authorization for use of military force is authorizing our invasion forces in Afghanistan and Iraq to do whatever they want if they're attacked, which, of course, under international law, the people of those countries have every right to do.
Yeah, that's correct. And people can really look at another incident that all of the country, I think all of the world knows about it, which is the killing of the General Soleimani back in January, just at the beginning of this year. So the same attack that Merkley and Democrats were criticizing, killing the General Soleimani. The same attack killed another leader. I think he's the top in the leadership of the PMU, which is the militia force, the official militia force in Iraq that was formed to fight ISIS, the Popular Mobilization
Popular Mobilization Units. And the State Department, U.S. State Department, calls them quote-unquote Iran-backed militias.
Yeah, by the way, Merkley calls them the same thing, Iranian-backed militia, but they are Iraqis, and they are authorized by their government. They are part of the forces of the Iraqi government.
Yes.
They are recognized, and something that he
therefore,
doesn't talk about. Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to comment. Therefore, it is legal for Iran to back them.
Yes, and even if Iran back them, is that a reason to kill them?
Why should Iran not have ties with Iraq?
So anyhow,
And it's at the Iraqis' invitation.
So it's what they did is legal for them, but it was not legal for us. I don't know how we justify even legalities with killing people. This shouldn't be a discussion. How do we kill someone who didn't do anything to us, except he's not willing to give up his country? He's not really trying to stop resisting our politics. So we go ahead and kill them. Anyhow, so what happened during that attack, the top leader at the same attack that killed Soleimani, he was in the same car. His name was Abu Mahdi Mohandes. He was an Iraqi, and because of that attack, the Iraqi people erupted. They started protesting. They took it to the streets. The Iraqi parliament voted to expel the U.S. troops from Iraq. And Merkley's speech, no, this is the point. Merkley's speech, he was attacking Trump decision to kill Soleimani. He was calling Trump inept, incompetent, and a disastrous. It was one of the things that called that attack. He called strategically disastrous. He talks about strategy again, Merkley here. He doesn't talk about human rights. He doesn't talk about international law. He doesn't talk about constitution. He talks about strategy, strategically disastrous. And he was upset that this attack resulted in the Iraqi people demanding that we leave their country. He was upset that we need to leave Iraq. By the way, Pompeo, after that decision from the Iraqi parliament to expel the US troops, what Pompeo did is he went there and threatened them with sanctions. It's all documented, but people need to look at it. This is what we have done. And where's Merkley from all of that? He looked the other way on the Iraq because he supported our presence there and only pretended to oppose the war on Iran. And by the way, he never stopped sanctioning them, supporting sanctioning on them, spreading the lies about their nuclear program. Dan, go ahead.
His job in the Senate, at least among the Democrats, and probably in the whole American political system regarding foreign policy, is to define the far left edge of the Overton window and keep anyone from actually going further than that. And so he's an illusion. He's not real. He's not for real. What did you say? He said about Iran, he's not disputing this whole notion that Iran is our enemy. And I don't believe he's ever disputed the fantasy that Iran has been seeking nuclear weapons either.
No, not at all. Regardless, there was...
So again, you're talking about what he is not doing, and that's what's very important. What are we electing a politician to do? To represent us, to represent our values, to not make a disgrace of our country, to not represent our country as an international outlaw, which is exactly what he and the entire Democratic Party and most of the Republican Party does. It's okay for us to drive on the wrong side of the street and for Israel to drive on the wrong side of the street, and everybody else can just get out of the way. That's what he represents.
Yeah, it is really sad. And so far, I think we covered Syria and Libya, and we talked a little bit about his policy with Iran and Iraq. Now I would like to go to the Yemen. So most of the people don't know that Obama started bombing Yemen with drone strikes in 2013. Obama gave the green light to the Saudi coalition to wage a war on Yemen in 2015. So in 2015, the actual war started, but we were already bombing them, bombing Yemenis, again, violating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, killing people, violating the international law, violating our constitution, and the whole Congress was silent. Until 2016, there was a UN report came out assessing the casualties, how many people were killed in Yemen. And that report, they mentioned that at least 5,000 civilians in 1 year were killed. About 1,000 of them are kids. And so what happened, according to that report, it was out in 2016. According to that report, Rand Paul and Chris Murphy, they introduced a legislation to stop the support for the Saudis. And you know, when our government say that they are going to stop the support, it means that the war is going to end. There's no discussion. This is the United States government. When they say that we're not going to support their war, it is impossible to continue a war. If we don't give the green light for a government to wage a war, then it's not going to happen. So what happened is Chris Murphy and Rand Paul introduced that bill in September 2016 to stop the support.
Senate Joint Resolution 39.
Correct. So it was introduced in the Senate. 71 criminal in the Senate. And I say criminals because after looking at the UN report, 5,000 civilians were dead, killed by the Saudis. 1,000 of them were children. After looking at that report, and accordingly, some people trying to stop this atrocity, and they bring it to the Senate to stop it, then 71 members in the Senate stopped against that bill. They voted to table it. They voted to table it, meaning to table legislation in the Senate and the Congress, meaning to kill the bill. And this is what has happened. 71 members voted against that legislation, including Merkley, who after 2 years after that legislation, he came out crying wolf. He's saying, look at Trump selling these arms to the Saudis that kill people. This is what he has done. And people don't want to recognize what a monster he is. Can you imagine someone telling you, civilians were killed just right now, let's stop them, and you vote against them? What kind of person does that? But again, this is what Merkley has done, and nobody wants to discuss it. And again, the media is silent about it.
And it's not only civilians that count. The Saudis attacked a country illegally, just as we do. And that means that everybody killed is a war crime, not just civilians.
And this happened in a context of over $100 billion in arms sales to the Saudis had already happened under Obama, during the Obama administration, by the time the Yemen war started. So the Saudis were already fighting that war with weapons that we had supplied. I wrote to Merkley asking him why he voted to table that motion, and he wrote me a reply saying a lot of really vague talking point type stuff that said, well, Saudi Arabia's our important ally in the Middle East, and he had some kind of assurance that some specific sort of air-to-ground munition wasn't going to be used.
I remember reading your email. I
Yeah.
remember he used again the word strategy
Right.
in that email. He said, Saudis are our strategic ally in the region.
Yes.
So he
Trump,
always think about a strategy there, how to control that region. This is how
not
he
just
thinks.
Well, the
not just
reason that
strategy.
Saudis are as a strategic ally is because Saudi oil underwrites the dollar.
Not only that, sir, because the Saudis are very friendly to the Israeli government,
Yes,
which Merkley takes money from one of its lobbyists here. And people don't want to look at his money too. It is J Street and other investment firms that he used to take their money from. Dan, you wanted to say something?
The primary ethic of both the Democrats and Republicans in the federal government is the same thing that Trump says openly. They're all America first, and they've all been that way for decades. It's not a new thing. It's just something that Trump makes more of a show of. And so, of course, now the Democrats try to hide it. And when the tides turn politically, they'll probably all start waving flags again too. Once they feel like it will benefit them. But it's all a good cop, bad cop act. And
it's
Merkley is good cop.
it's a kabuki
And
theater that's
good,
a ritual that takes place every 2 years.
right? Well, if you dealt with the good cop, bad cop acts, good cop is the dangerous one because good cop is the one who can fool you and turn you against your own self and your own interests. Bad cop doesn't fool anyone. Bad cop just intimidates you.
Yeah, that's correct. I always say if someone bombs you while smiling, you think that he's friendly to you, then he bombs you and stab you in the back. This is the kind of attack that you never seen coming. You did not expect. And this is what Democrats usually do. They bomb people with a smile. Obama waged more wars, dropped more bombs than any president in our history while smiling. And he got the Nobel Prize for peace, the Peace Nobel Prize. And he bombed and killed hundreds of thousands of people. So anyhow, Merkley, again, he was supportive of the war on Yemen. He stood against ending that war. And when they voted for in 2018, when they pretended that they wanted to end that support to the Saudis, again, like you said, Dan, the Saudis already had more than 110 billions in arms stocked, sold by Obama at that point. And again, that bill has some exception. They said they want to remove our military from the hostility in Yemen with one condition, Mr. Dresser. Dan, I think you know about that condition.
Yes, the condition was if they're operating on Israel's behalf, then they can still continue operating there.
Yes, and
They wanted to make sure, I think the specific wording was they want to make sure that nothing would interfere with our relationship with Israel.
yeah, so if there's like some interest for Israel in that operation, in that military operation, that we want to pretend to be stopping, then they don't need to stop. This is what they did. And it was like a useless bill. It didn't do anything. Right now, we have military presence on one of the Yemeni islands. Right now, we still have troops on Yemeni's land right now, and nobody's talking about it, including those people who pretended that they are against this humanitarian crisis. Right
I
now,
think that is right on an island near the Bab el-Mandab Strait, leading into the Red Sea, and that is extremely strategic because much of the war on Yemen has to do with vast oil supplies under the Gulf of Oman and the Red Sea that goes all the way across to Somalia. And the United States cut a deal with the Saudis clear back during the 1980s to prevent Yemen from developing its own oil resources, which is one of the largest reserves left in the world.
Well, now I'm sharing the screen.
Okay.
I want the people to see for themselves when we talk about wars, when we talk about killing people, what does that mean? What we are saying are not just words. Look for yourself. Look at how many has been killed. Look at these bags. Look at the destruction that was caused. Look at this guy who's really holding his kid. How many thousands were killed like this? This is Yemen. This is in Syria. You just Google it and look at the destruction. We are talking about people who support this destruction and still viewed as angels. What kind of mentality do we have? How can we really be comfortable supporting people who are fine killing people? Is that choose kindness, which is really popular in the between Democrats? Is that the message? You can see like yard signs, choose kindness, but at the same time, they go and vote for war criminals or politicians who supported these wars. What does that mean? What kind of society doesn't care about killing people? Everyone, when George Floyd was killed, everyone erupted, got mad, and deservedly so. The police brutality is a subject that nobody should tolerate. We need to demand reform. But all of them, because 1 or 3 people are being killed every day, erupted. But when we kill thousands overseas, thousands on top of thousands, there's no uproar. No one, if I tell the people that, for example, Merkley is supportive of that police officer who killed Breonna Taylor, if I go to the people and show them that Merkley supported that police officer, no one will vote for Merkley. But when I show them that Merkley supported these wars that killed hundreds of thousands of people, they don't mind. They don't mind. This is not a criteria in their evaluation. This is a criminal thing. I don't know how we don't really hold our politicians accountable for these crimes.
And those pictures you showed could have come from Syria. They could have come from Iraq. They could have come from Libya. All of which are wars that the Obama administration launched. And this moral indifference of the American public is just absolutely appalling.
Well, I think we should move on. We have a lot of bills of that sort that Merkley voted on.
And Ibra, they could have been in Gaza. And I know you wanted to talk a bit about Palestine.
Yeah.
Let me mention just one more bill because it is very important and it's one that went under most people's radar. It was in the Senate, it was called Senate Bill 722. In the House, it was House Resolution 3364, I think. And it was known as the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act.
Mm-hmm.
And it passed the Senate 98-2. The only votes against were Sanders and Rand Paul. And Sanders said he only voted against because of the sanctions against Iran. A unilateral sanctions bill is illegal under that UN charter we've been talking about. We can't, we don't have the right to do that. The part that dealt with Iran led ultimately, eventually, at least it contributed in large part to the Trump administration's decision to withdraw from the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. And of course, that Iran nuclear deal was a matter of extortion in the first place because they weren't actually seeking nuclear weapons. But that's a digression. Every Democrat voted for, or at least was not present, that bill of naming Russia, Iran, and North Korea enemies of the United States.
Yeah, well, I would
There
like
are
to
no,
mention.
and there was 3 Republicans in the House and 1 in the Senate. So the Republicans are basically no different. They have a handful of people who did the right thing. But that was a propaganda bill, and it was, of course, it was during the height of the whole Russiagate thing and the Russophobia. And the United States is still probably right around halfway under the spell of like, oh no, Russia this, Russia that. Some of the, I guess the recent leak about Ukraine and Hunter Biden, there's people saying, oh, the Russians did it.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
no,
Merkley is a Russia gator too.
right. This is not the kind of thing that an anti-war politician is going to say. They're not going to tell you that a country that really has, there's no reason to consider either Iran or Russia our enemies, but they stand up and say that. And this is the ones that people trust as anti-war candidates standing up and saying that. And they're saying, they're doing what I was saying before, setting the left end of that Overton window to where they're trying to make sure that nobody in the country is going to be viewing Iran or Russia as anything but an adversary. They'll talk all this nice peacenik type rhetoric, but then they'll turn around and say, well, yeah, Russia's our adversary, Iran's our adversary, and so on and so forth. And that is the root of the problem and why we never really get anything done to solve it.
Yeah, I would like to talk briefly about Venezuela. By the way, Merkley is supportive of these sanctions on Venezuela that so far killed more than 40,000 people in Venezuela. He's supportive of these sanctions. Sanctions kill people, and Merkley is supportive of them. Yes, he introduced a bill, a meaningless bill, saying that Trump should ask the Congress to authorize the use of force if he wants to go to war with Venezuela, which is, again, the same topic that we talked about. It is not up to the Congress, it's up to the international law. Anyhow, he was one of the people who supported the regime change in Venezuela again. He voted several times to sanction Nicaragua, Cuba, Iran, Russia, and several other countries. This is what Merkley did.
The countries that we target, that he supports targeting, are socialist countries, and the United States has a fixed agenda to prevent any socialist country from being economically successful.
Correct.